Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. Happy New Year. Welcome back. I for sure thought I was going to get this video out before the book came out, but now we're here and we're doing what we can with what we have. There may or may not be a chance that my reading strategy may have backfired a little bit, but because I promised you this video is here. We're talking about Really Good Actually today. This is a book that I won in a giveaway on Goodreads, and I told you in my reading recap video that I would be making a story study on this book, so that is probably the main reason that I have finished it, because I definitely wanted to put this book down a few times, and I probably would have if I hadn't told you to expect this video. This book came out on January 17th, so just a few days ago, and I've got links for it in the description if you are in a different place than me and have more interest in this book. So for a quick summary of this story, Maggie is almost 30 and her life is mostly figured out. That is until she and her husband of less than 5 years realize they don't love each other anymore and separate, leaving Maggie, who's gotten unknowingly comfortable being a we person, to struggle through all of the strife of being alone and unhappy with every aspect of her life, all while trying and failing to convince everyone around her that she is really good, actually. Let's get into my thoughts on this one. I will say, towards the beginning of this book, there was a lot that I related to, a lot of things that I could directly align myself with having thought in the past, in like that kind of experience of being in a breakup. These tabs that I put in this book, I don't normally tab books, but there were so many things at the front of the book that I was like, wow, this feels a lot like me, that I just sort of tabbed all of them, and it was really something that tapered off a whole lot in the middle. And then there were a couple of things at the end that were actually like more optimistic points of view that I also aligned with, so I marked those as well. But a lot at the beginning that was very relatable. I think that was strong enough at the beginning that I was like, wow, this is going to be a really relatable book. There's going to be something that's going to connect deeply with me because of that I said I was going to make a video on it prematurely. So here we are. I will say that being able to witness how her friends' lives continue on and how they are reacting to Maggie, while she's so fully centered in herself that she doesn't get to witness what's happening, it puts you in a very interesting position, because as a reader, I was aligned a lot more with her friends than I was with her. So watching them live their lives was really interesting and a really unique touch to show how self-involved Maggie became at that point in the story. And I think that that did a really good job of showing the importance of what actually matters, and that all tied together by the end of it. This is a very touching story about friendship, and it does a really good job digging into friendship. I also enjoyed the way that the story ties itself to the romance genre without ever really being a romance story. Like, you expect certain things from it because of how it's structured, but those things are subverted and you're taken in a totally different direction, and then you end up getting this really beautiful story about friendship. And I think it does that very well. Now, on to what I think could be improved. I don't think this book was for me. I can say that with full confidence. Extremely put downable for me, because I am somebody who is in a happy, healthy relationship. And being in a happy, healthy relationship and being long removed from my last breakup that would have had a similar effect on me, I didn't dig into the story as much as I maybe could have. But at the same time, I literally cannot imagine recommending this book to somebody going through a breakup. I cannot imagine being like, oh, hey, you know what? Maybe this book would be a good option for you. I know you're going through it, but like, this is going to make you feel better, or this is going to make you feel less alone. I don't think I would ever recommend this book to somebody at a similar point as Maggie is at the beginning of this story. It really exemplifies and highlights a lot of very unhealthy reactions to a breakup. There would have to be a lot of details that are shared with me from that person who's going through a breakup, that I know that they are in the same point that Maggie is at, that they won't go to therapy or talk to somebody, or that they're pushing their friends and family away, or something along those lines, that I would recommend them this book. Because if they're not going to hear anybody else's advice, maybe they'd associate with somebody else going through the same advice, but that is not, it's not a healthy response to it. There's a lot of very deeply rooted things that are not healthy going on in this, and that's part of why the little tabs taper off is I would never do a lot of the things, and I would hope that none of the people that I am close with would ever do any of the things that Maggie went through. All that to say, I'm not entirely sure who this book is for, because I don't feel comfortable saying that it's for people going through a breakup. I definitely don't think it's anything that somebody who is in a relationship would enjoy. The only thing I could say is that it might be for people who want to feel like they're not as bad as somebody else, or somebody who is as bad as Maggie who needs somebody else to show them a way out of the hole that they're digging themselves into. I don't personally know anybody that I would recommend this book for, and that makes it very hard for me to be able to recommend this book to somebody. Like, I know that there are a lot of people on the other side of the screen who are watching that have different things going on in their lives, and I am not privy to those things, so maybe somebody out there would relate to it, but I would feel like I'm insulting you by saying, like, you should read this book if you're doing XYZ, if you're in XYZ position. And I'm not sure how I would improve that, besides taking large chunks of the story out of the story to make it more generally relatable. But if it's more generally relatable, I don't know how genuine the character would feel. So it's kind of one of those here or there type of things where there's an option for it to be right as it is, and it's just not right for me. It's not right for the people that I have in my life, and that's okay. But I can't conceptualize a person. Like, I can't make up the person that I would say you should read this book to. And that's a rough one for me. I don't love that. On another note, Maggie is very much a I'm the main character kind of main character. And that's okay. There are people who are in real life thinking that they are the main character that live their lives like that. It does make a lot of sense for how she handles all of her situations, that she would be that type of person. And the way that she handles those situations, I would align with that type of person. But it did feel out of place at times, and I could just be leaning too heavily on stereotypes with this, but it did feel like there were aspects of her life that didn't align with her being a main character type of person, and that there were either people or life choices that could have been changed about her or around her that would make it more appropriate or acceptable to me as a reader that she's the main character type of main character. And I think making a couple of small changes would have made it less out of place that that's how she lives her life. But at the same time, we might have ended up with a totally different story, which I'm not against having a totally different story personally. Another thing that is probably just a me thing, but Maggie falls very heavily into the world of cliches and avoiding becoming a cliche, so much so that she becomes a cliche all on her own, in her own unique individual way. She is very much so a cliche in that, and it's exhausting very early on. It's so tiring to just hear like, oh, I don't want to be that girl, or just putting certain things into like title case where the first letter is a capital letter and saying like, I don't want to be the person who eats their feelings. Like, ugh, very exhausting to me. And I genuinely lost empathy for her very early in the book. And when her problems got more difficult for her to deal with, it became harder for me to read about her, harder for me to care what the end result was. And this book is just shy of 400 pages, or I guess it's just over 350 pages, and I probably lost empathy for her at about like 120 pages in. I didn't care anymore. All of her problems were, from my perspective, solvable, but she was just avoiding the solution because it seemed like it felt better for her to just be sad. Her friends also felt the same way as me. Like, all of your problems are solvable, but you just refuse to dig yourself out of this depression. You refuse to acknowledge the fact that you are sad and stop being angry. So I related a lot with her friends, and there was a point when her friends sort of disappeared from the picture and you were just sort of left alone. You as the reader were left alone with Maggie. And I really just missed her friends a lot because they were saying what I was thinking, even though Maggie wasn't hearing it. Neither here nor there. Her mindset was very tiring for me. It was very tiring and very bland in a way that I'm sure real people's lives are. I have no doubt that there are real people that have that same mindset, but it was just so far from my own when I expected to see myself more in this book from the beginning. I saw myself a lot in the book and I was like, cool, this is gonna be really good for me. And then I stopped seeing myself and I started seeing the very opposite of myself, and that was disappointing. But it's not necessarily something that you need to be really aligned with the character to enjoy a book. I definitely don't need to be really aligned with the character to enjoy a book. It's the like bait and switch that got me and made it more upsetting than maybe it would have been if I didn't align with her at all. This book is definitely marketed as being funny. The author is a screenwriter who writes comedies. It's definitely being marketed as something that is funny. Sad and funny are definitely in like the first paragraph of the Goodreads summary. And it's definitely sad. And I will say that there are jokes in it, but it's funny in the way that you don't want to laugh because it's so painful that they're making these jokes. It's funny in the way that you're trying to make your therapist laugh about how bad you are at handling your problems. It's not funny like this is something I can laugh at without feeling bad about laughing at. It's realistic. It's definitely realistic that somebody could be funny in a very dark time. It's so realistic. It's kind of cringy the times that it's funny. And it could just be me. It could just be me having lost my empathy for the character very early on in the story. It could just be that, for sure. I'm sure that if I still cared about the character, maybe the jokes would have hit me in a different spot, but they didn't because I didn't care about the character. So those are the things that kind of align together to make something work. And I definitely think it would have been refreshing to have funny situations that weren't directly wrapped around Maggie's grief and sorrow and like self-forced suffering. Maybe there would be times that I could have had, this is a funny book. It just wasn't there. It was all so self-wrapped and petty and angry and not funny. It's another one of those things that's kind of like a bait and switch kind of thing. So what can writers learn from this book? There can possibly be a point in your own story that maybe moving things along a little faster or taking things out of your story may make it more impactful. Because I definitely think this book should have been like 200 pages, 250 pages max, and it was 365 pages. If this book was in fact shorter, I probably would have liked it more because I would have had less time to spend with Maggie and not caring about her. And there is a chance that by removing some of the things that made me lose empathy for Maggie would have made it easier for me to keep the empathy, and I could just not be the target audience for this book. Not sure who the target audience is for this book, but neither here nor there. I think this book would benefit from having some things removed, for my experience. There may be a point in your own story where taking something out may make something else more impactful. And even though you spent the time developing that, it may end up a better, fuller picture if you remove something in it to highlight something else. Humor and sadness can definitely work together in a story to make something impactful. It's definitely possible. I do think it is very important to have each of those allowed their own space, so that you aren't tying humor to everything that's sad or tying sadness into everything that's funny, so that you don't have to weigh everything down so far that humor and sadness become muddled together and hard to separate. I know for a fact that there are funny stories that directly relate to someone's sadness. I'm positive about that. I know that. But they need to have moments to live on their own. There needs to be moments where a character is just sad and they're not making jokes about how they're sad, or they're not trying to narrate to themselves about why they shouldn't be sad in a funny kind of way for the reader to laugh at them for, because that takes away a lot of the depth that sadness could have, and it loses some of the impact that it could have on a reader to see somebody who's maybe trying to make things funny and trying to make things lighthearted and doing that kind of thing feel sadness and sadness alone. And then having humorous moments that are maybe outside of the sad character's experience. Maybe they're not making the funny thing happen, but something funny is happening around them. They allow themselves to partake in just pure joy, pure humor, pure laughter. And that can be something that you can highlight the difference of the sadness. When they're always together, they both lose strength. This is also a great example of why fleshing out your characters and having them live their own individual lives and have things going on that they are working towards outside of your main character of the story can make it super impactful on your reader's understanding of the main character, and also give your reader something to associate with outside of the main character when maybe your main character is going through the darkest pit and needs to be unlikable and unrelatable, and you need your readers to have something to grasp onto, to relate to. And in general, just having really fleshed out side characters makes it easier to understand your main character, and this is definitely a good example of when side characters are fully developed and have their own things going on, but don't overtake the main story and simply highlight and add to the main story. You make the main character seem like something is happening that is very clear and understandable, and you know what's going on with them because of how their friends are going about their lives due to or in spite of what the main character is doing. But that is all that I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out and show YouTube that maybe other people might like this video. I really wanted to like this book. It's like a 2.5 star book for me. It's not there. It's not hitting the marks yet. It's just not for me. That is unfortunate. But if you think that this book is for you, and not that I sold it very well, but if you think that, like, you know somebody who would want to read this book, you know who this book is for, please leave me a comment, because I'm genuinely confused. I don't know. I just don't know who it's for. And that's unfortunate. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I'm also always happy to take book recommendations. If there are any stories that you would like to hear my take on, any books that you love, hate, otherwise, I would love to know. I'm here every Tuesday and Saturday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Story Study Saturdays, so I will see you guys on Tuesday for a writing tip video.